The announcement today is the most significant action on global trade policy that has taken place in our lifetimes. It's not even a close call. This is probably the biggest event that's happened on global trade since the very ill-fated decision that we are now reversing of knocking down all of America's trade tariffs and revenue policies that led to the offshoring and outsourcing of all of our industry. So this is the great reversal of that great betrayal, is how I would look at it. So in the 20th century, successive American presidents knocked down all of the policies that we had to protect American industry, and they did insane things like letting China into the World Trade Organization, as an example. And we watched all of our factories go overseas. This is the complete reversal of that. This is the great onshoring, the great reshoring of American jobs and wealth. So if you look at America today, we're totally dependent on foreign countries for the supplies that make this country run, for all of the essential goods, materials, manufactured products that make it possible for us to live our lives. Our cars, our electronics, all the materials that go into our homes, our buildings, our medical supplies, our entire supply chains are completely embedded in foreign countries. So if there's a national emergency of any kind, and a country shuts off an import, or a foreign power embargoes a sea lane, we are then left defenseless, helpless, because of the decisions that prior leaders made that President Trump is now reversing to let all of these industries leave our country. And so what he's doing today is, for the first time ever, he's saying that if you have stolen our jobs and therefore threatened our national security, we will apply a reciprocal tariff based on the degree of your misconduct. So for countries like China, for example, they will see a very high tariff rate because they've engaged in the most egregious conduct that threatens our national security. For countries that have severe but not as severe misconduct, they'll see a moderate but not as high tariff rate. The effect, though, of those global tariffs will be that companies will have to move their production back into the United States. So factories will leave, whether it be Mexico or Canada or Vietnam or Cambodia or China or the European Union. They will come back to the United States to produce their products, to make their goods. And in so doing, yes, it will create jobs. Yes, it will increase revenues. But most importantly, it will restore our national security so that we will not be dependent on anyone else to survive and thrive as a nation. That's the American people.
Well, if you go back a little bit, Lawrence, remember during the first Trump administration, everybody said that Trump's tariffs were going to be inflationary back then. What actually happened? We had 1.5% inflation. We had the fastest growing economy in a generation, and we had the beginning of a manufacturing renaissance in the United States of America. Then, of course, we had 4 terrible years of the Biden administration. But I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is, fundamentally, it's based on 2 principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America. For 40 years, we have gone down that pathway. We've seen closing factories. We've seen rising inflation. We've seen the cost of housing so high that most Americans can't afford to buy a home right now. President Trump is taking this economy in a different direction. He ran on that, he promised it, and now he's delivering. And yes, this is a big change. I'm not going to shy away from it, but we needed a big change, Lawrence. We cannot keep going down the Joe Biden globalist pathway where we have $2 trillion of peacetime debt and deficits. We have manufacturing disappearing. That is not working.
What I find so frustrating about the conversation around tariffs is that we all agree on the problem. We all agree that the deindustrialization of America led to the downward mobility of the American working class, deaths of despair, people working multiple jobs and not being able to afford the American dream. We all agree that it is deeply unfair for the American middle class to be bearing the burden of unfair tariffs from other countries. We all agree that it is great for the president to have leverage in order to demand reasonable things, like that countries stop allowing fentanyl to murder 100,000 Americans every year, and that Mexico do its part to police its own border. And yet when somebody has the courage to show up and say to Wall Street, screw you, I am waging war. I'm waging class warfare on behalf of the American working class. And you elites in Wall Street, you do what you need to do because I'm not going to stop fighting for the American working class. Suddenly, everybody is sitting around going, oh no, the stock market. Yeah, the stock market looks like that because the rich are punishing Trump for siding with the neglected and humiliated American working class over them. We have already seen these tariffs work, Pierce. The number of people crossing the southern border is at zero. Fentanyl is at record lows for the last 10 years. We have already seen $1.2 trillion in manufacturing invested in this country since January 21st. So they have already worked. Now, how long is Wall Street going to keep trying to punish this president for standing the American working class? I don't know, but I can tell you that the view from the street is people cannot believe that there is a president who is working for them, who is putting them first and telling Wall Street to go screw itself. Wall Street, which picked the Democrats for the last 3 election cycles in a row. That's what the real story is here. American Compass did a survey of just GOP voters. We know now that the majority of Americans who make under $100,000 a year now vote for the Republican Party. So that was almost a means-tested poll. And they found that 77% of GOP voters, the working class, not the elites, said that when they were asked, they said they would be willing to pay higher prices if it meant bringing back manufacturing, because of course in their mind they are going to be the beneficiaries of those manufacturing jobs. About Canada, a lot of people are asking, why Canada? We love Canada. Canada are our friends. Why wage this, tariff war on Canada? And of course the answer is simple. Canada and Mexico are the back door to the American economy because we have this trade deal with them, the USMCA. So if there are no tariffs on China, if Canada and Mexico do not match our tariffs on China, China simply builds car manufacturing plants in Canada and in Mexico, which they have already done, and they use that in order to get tariff-free cars into the American market, which is exactly what President Trump is trying to get away from. So what he wants from them is for them to close that back door. And I just want to emphasize again, back in the 70s, when the majority of the GDP in America was in the middle class, right? That's kind of like the golden era that we look back to of when the economy was really healthy and working class people felt that they could afford a middle class life. 25% of our economy was in manufacturing. Today, the top 10% control over 60% of the GDP. And that is a direct result of the fact that only 10% of our economy is manufacturing. And the largest share, 20%, is in finance and real estate, which is, of course, how other countries we have artificially inflated the dollar, which makes the product of the American worker unaffordable. And so what the tariffs are doing are simply saying we are refusing the race to the bottom in wages. It is unfair to the American worker, which I think we have all basically agreed on at this.
The significance we're talking about today